Imagine receiving a call in the middle of the night about a loved one whose life has completely unraveled, leaving you grappling with a whirlwind of chaos, betrayal, and the crushing decision of whether to keep trying or finally let go. That's exactly what happened to me with my brother John. What started as a desperate plea for help quickly turned into a painful realization that sometimes there is no saving someone who refuses to be saved. Let's call me Mike, have a brother, John, who's always been an angry and troubled person. Ever since we were kids, John had a bad temper and a knack for getting into trouble. He idolized gang members, thought they were cool, and acted like a tough guy who always needed respect from everyone. He had this way of intimidating people, trying to make them scared of him just because he could. Top comments before the update. 1. Tough love. It must have been really hard for you to say that to your brother, but sometimes tough love is necessary. You're not the a-hole. It's tough to see someone you care about make the same mistakes over and over, especially when they've been through so much. 2. Not the a-hole. Sometimes you can't save someone who's determined to drown, even if they're family. You've done your best, but there's only so much you can do when the person doesn't want to be saved. 3. Not the a-hole. Your brother fell back in with the wrong crowd, and it led to his relapse. You did what you could by reminding him of what he stands to lose. It may be harsh, but he probably needed to hear it. When John was a teenager, things got even worse. Our parents did everything they could to help him, but nothing seemed to work. By the time John was 16, he started using drugs, and when he turned 19, he got into serious trouble. He was arrested and sent to prison for 2 years. Prison changed him in a way none of us expected. When John got out of prison, he wasn't the same person anymore. He flinched whenever anyone touched him, slept with the lights on, and even added an extra lock to his bedroom door when he stayed with our parents. It was like he was a broken man, a shell of the person he used to be. Eventually, he had a complete mental breakdown and started talking about what happened to him in prison. The things he told us were horrifying, about the abuse and violence he faced every day. His aggressive nature made him a target, and he suffered a lot. After his release, John went to therapy for years to deal with his trauma. He's 32 now and has been trying to turn his life around. He went back to school, met a nice woman, let's call her Sarah, and was finally making progress. Our relationship isn't perfect, and it will probably never be fully healed, but he's been making an effort to be a better person. However, in the last few months, things started to change again. I could see it on his face and in the way he acted. He was slowly slipping back into his old ways. John became aggressive around our parents again, started picking fights when he went out, and began hanging out with people known to be violent felons and suspected drug dealers. He had a girlfriend for about a year, but she left him because he started screaming at her, throwing things around their apartment, and even threatening to hurt her. It was clear he was using drugs again, and he was throwing away years of progress. Our parents tried talking to him, offering him help, and even suggesting he go to rehab. They invited him to stay with them for a while, hoping they could help him get back on track. But John exploded in anger at them, and after years of dealing with his behavior, they finally walked away. They blocked his number and decided they were done trying to help him. I decided to try talking to him myself. When I went to his place, it was a mess. There were empty alcohol bottles and pill containers scattered all over. When I pointed out the obvious, he got hostile and threatened me. That's when I snapped. I reminded him of what he had told us about his time in prison, how terrible it was, and warned him that if he didn't fix his behavior, he'd end up back there. But this time, no one would be there to help him clean up his mess. John's reaction was immediate. He just shut down, curled up on the couch, and weakly told me to leave. Ever since that moment, I felt terrible for bringing up his prison trauma. But at the same time, I'm frustrated. He's throwing away everything he worked so hard to rebuild. He knows how awful prison is, yet he's doing everything possible to end up back there. It's like he's spitting in the face of everyone who tried to help him, chasing after the same mistakes that almost destroyed his life. Last night was a nightmare I never saw coming. It started with a frantic call from one of John's neighbors. Apparently, John had been spiraling out of control for weeks, but last night was the breaking point. He got so high that he completely lost it, transforming his apartment into something out of a horror movie. The neighbor described the scene to me: holes punched through the walls, furniture reduced to splinters, and shattered glass everywhere from broken windows. It wasn't just his apartment either. He went ballistic on the entire floor. The neighbor recounted how John, in a fit of rage, tried to kick down their door, his screams echoing through the hallway like something straight out of a nightmare. When they shouted at him to stop, threatening to call the police, he lost it even more. He started hurling rocks at their windows, screaming obscenities, and threatening to kill them. The sheer madness in his eyes, they said, was something they'd never forget. When the police finally arrived, the situation escalated even further. John, in his delusional state, decided to take on the cops. It was a brutal fight. He went after them with a terrifying intensity, landing punches until they had no choice but to bring him down with force. By the time they managed to subdue him, John was barely recognizable, bloodied, bruised, and ranting incoherently. They had to strap him down to a stretcher before rushing him to the hospital. That's when I got the call. Against my better judgment, I went to see him. I knew I shouldn't have, but some part of me still hoped there was something left of the brother I used to know. But when I got there, I saw him strapped to the hospital bed in restraints, thrashing and screaming like a madman. His eyes were wild, and he was completely out of it, spewing gibberish and threats. The nurses couldn't even get close to him without him snapping at them like a wild animal. That was the moment I realized I couldn't save him. I turned around and walked out without saying a word. Later, I spoke with the cops, and what they told me was the final nail in the coffin. They found a stash of drugs in his apartment that could have put away a whole gang. He wasn't just destroying property. He was assaulting police officers, making death threats, and terrorizing his neighbors. And if that wasn't enough, he's already under investigation for sending violent, threatening messages to his ex-girlfriend. At this point, it's clear he's not just going back to prison. He's going away for a long, long time. And honestly, I'm okay with that. This time, I didn't feel the usual dread or guilt that always gnawed at me whenever he got into trouble. This time, I felt something different: relief. A heavy burden lifted off my shoulders, like I was finally free from the chaos and stress that John's life always brought into mine. Our parents, they're done with him too. They spent years trying to help, trying to fix things, but it's over now. Everyone who ever cared about John has reached their breaking point. There's no coming back from this, and maybe that's for the best. The person I used to call my brother is gone. The person in that hospital bed is a stranger, a man consumed by his demons, beyond saving. And as harsh as it sounds, I'm done trying to fight a battle that's already lost. For the first time in years, I can breathe easy, knowing that this chapter of my life is finally over. After John's episode at the hospital, I knew I had to confront him one last time before cutting him off for good. He's locked up now, and despite everything, not a single person, family or friend, has even considered bailing him out. His charges are stacking up, and with the severity of his crimes, it's almost certain he'll be in there for years, maybe even decades. But something in me needed closure. I needed to understand why, after everything we've been through, he chose to destroy what little he had left. So I made the difficult decision to visit him. The prison was cold, both in temperature and atmosphere, a stark contrast to the chaotic heat of John's last outburst. When I arrived, they told me he was in solitary confinement due to his violent behavior, but I could still talk to him through a phone. As I waited, I wondered what I'd say, how I'd find the right words to break through to him, to make him see the damage he's caused. Desperate, I asked him why he was doing this, practically begging for some kind of explanation, something that would make this nightmare make sense. But instead of answering, he exploded. His face contorted with rage, and he started screaming at me, hurling insults and threats, saying he didn't need any of us, that we were the ones who abandoned him. The more I tried to calm him down, the angrier he got until I heard the sound of a struggle on his end, a scuffle with the guards trying to restrain him before the call abruptly cut off. I sat there in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone ringing in my ears like a funeral bell. It was over. The person I'd tried so hard to save didn't want saving. It was like he had made up his mind to burn every bridge, to push everyone who cared about him as far away as possible. People in the comments have been quick to judge, quick to assume our parents, and I mishandled his behavior and his mental health care. But they don't know the half of it. I can tell you this, our parents poured every spare dime, every ounce of energy into trying to help John. They sacrificed so much, even at the expense of their relationship with me, just to give him a fighting chance. They put him in psychiatric care, therapy, group activities, everything you could think of to steer him on the right path. And what did they get in return? A son who threw it all back in their faces. When John got out of prison the first time, we all treated it like a new beginning. We never made him apologize, never asked him to take responsibility for the hurt he caused. We just focused on helping him get better, on moving forward. But now, after all that effort, after all the sacrifices, he chose to destroy any chance of redemption. He threw away the second chance that so many people would kill for. Well, he got what he wanted. He's alone now, truly and utterly alone in that prison cell, and that's where he's going to stay. I'm no fool. I know his game. He pushes us to our breaking point, then reels us back in with promises of change, of wanting to do better. But not this time. This time, I'm done. Our parents are too, removing him completely from their lives, erasing him from the family in every way that matters. They're livid, heartbroken, but resolute. And when he finally realizes that he's burned his last bridge, that there's no one left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, it'll be too late. He'll be stuck in that cell, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. And for once, he'll have no one to blame but himself. And maybe then he'll understand the full weight of what he's lost. But by then, we'll all have moved on, free from the chaos he brought into our lives. Maybe that's the saddest part of all, knowing that the person we once loved is gone, replaced by a stranger who chose self-destruction over redemption. But in a way, it's also a relief. For the first time in years, we can finally start to heal, knowing that we did everything we could. And now we can walk away without looking back. Final update. After a lot of sleepless nights and painful conversations, I've made the hardest decision of my life. I'm cutting off all contact with John for good. My parents feel the same way, and as a family, we're all in agreement. It's a tough choice, but it feels like the only way to protect ourselves from the constant stress, chaos, and heartbreak that John brings into our lives. John's downward spiral has been devastating to witness. We've tried everything: therapy, interventions, endless conversations, but nothing seemed to get through to him. Each time we thought we saw a glimmer of hope, he'd pull us back into his storm, only to drag us down even deeper. But after his latest outburst, where he showed absolutely no remorse, we realized something important. John doesn't want to change. He doesn't want our help or our love. And that's a painful truth to accept, but it's the reality we have to face. After his last arrest, when I tried to talk to him one last time, something inside me broke. He was so cold, so uncaring, even laughing at the pain he caused. I remember sitting there, phone in hand, listening to him rant about how he didn't need any of us, how he was going to get back at everyone who wronged him. And in that moment, I realized that John was no longer the person I once knew. The brother I grew up with, the person I shared so many memories with, he's gone. It was like looking into the eyes of a stranger, someone who had completely lost their way. And the worst part was, he didn't even seem to care. He was so far gone, so wrapped up in his own anger and bitterness, that nothing I said mattered. That's when I knew I had to let go. It's not that I didn't love him. I did, and I still do. But sometimes, love isn't enough. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself, and for them, is to walk away. My parents are heartbroken, but they understand. They've poured so much of themselves into trying to save John, but now they see that it's a losing battle. We've all been on this roller coaster for too long, hoping for a different outcome, only to be disappointed time and time again. So we're done. We're done waiting for John to change, done hoping he'll finally realize the damage he's done. We're done being dragged through his messes, his lies, and his constant need for chaos. And it's not just about protecting ourselves from him. It's about reclaiming our lives. I'm sharing this final update because I know there are others out there going through the same thing. You might have a loved one who's spiraling out of control, who's hurting themselves and everyone around them. And you might be holding on, hoping that one day they'll wake up and everything will be okay. But the truth is, sometimes that day never comes. And that's okay. It's okay to let go. It's okay to choose your own well-being over the endless cycle of trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. It's okay to protect your heart, your mind, and your soul from the damage they cause. I don't know what the future holds for John. Maybe one day he'll realize what he's lost and try to turn his life around. But that's not something I can worry about anymore. I've done everything I could, and now I need to move on. We all do. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I want you to know that it's okay to let go. You don't have to keep holding on to someone who refuses to change, even if they're family, even if you love them with all your heart. You deserve peace. You deserve happiness. And sometimes the only way to find that is to let go. Reflection. After everything John has put us through, his wild outbursts, the destruction he left in his wake, and his utter disregard for all the support and love we tried to offer, one undeniable truth has emerged. Some people simply refuse to change, no matter how much we wish they would. We had hoped, believed, and tried every possible way to help him, but his actions made it clear that he was determined to push us away. Deciding to cut him out of our lives was not easy. It felt like tearing away a part of ourselves, but it was a necessary step to safeguard our own mental and emotional health. We had to confront the painful reality that sometimes, despite our best efforts, the only way to preserve our own peace and sanity is to let go of the people who continue to hurt us. Joan's story is a stark reminder that even the strongest bonds can sometimes be broken when someone refuses to accept help or change their destructive ways. It leaves us questioning if we will ever fully understand why he chose this path, and if we can truly heal from the impact of his actions. The hardest part is accepting that no matter how deep the connections may be, they can still fracture beyond repair. As we move forward, we are left with the uncertainty of what could have been and the haunting thought of whether he will ever look back and regret the choices he made. For us, the journey is about finding peace and reclaiming our lives, even if it means leaving behind someone we once cared for deeply. 1. Have you ever had to make the tough decision to cut someone out of your life, despite your deep emotional connection with them? How did it affect you? 2. What do you think is the hardest part about letting go of a loved one who refuses to change? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. I'm interested to hear how others have navigated similar situations.